everybody. Whew, watching that film all over again. How do you feel every time you watch it?
Yeah, it's a little emotional. It hits a little different, too, with all of you incredible people here coming out to see the film. This is why we make these films, so that people can watch them. So thank you for being here.
So we watch this film, and we watch the 10 years of the unfolding of the story of two women. And you were there living in Afghanistan for 10 years, I believe, as well?
5 years.
Oh, 5 years, okay. And you told the story of two women. Were there any other stories that you saw unfold there in your 5 years living there or going back and forth that you couldn't tell that didn't end up in this film?
Yes. Thousands of other stories. This is one of the things about trying to be a storyteller, is that you want to tell everybody's story. Everybody has a story. We chose to tell their stories because we wanted to shine a light on women's rights in Afghanistan, and we wanted to do it through the perspective of women, because that's the only way one can do that, I believe. And let me take this moment here to acknowledge the fact that I'm a white dude sitting here on stage, but I'm here representing and supporting the incredible women who I was honored to collaborate with, my co-director Clem, my producer Leslie, our associate producer Farzana Wahidi, who was one of the first female photographers in Afghanistan after the fall of Taliban in 2001, our composer Pinar Toprak. And also, I want to acknowledge a couple of people here tonight, too. Guys, if you could stand up, there's two other dudes in the audience, too. Jeff, our EP, Jeff Zimbalist. Nick Bradford, our editor, over here. Yeah, thank you very much. You guys are awesome. But I mentioned the team because it does take a team to make this film. And Leslie and Clem were the ones who went into the prisons every single day to interview women and find the stories of Gulnaz and Farida. And there are thousands of women at the time who were in prison for moral crimes. It was very hard to find these two stories, but we chose to tell their stories because they were enthusiastically eager to participate in telling their story. I believe as a filmmaker, we don't go in and tell other people's stories. We collaborate with people to tell our stories together. And Gulnaz and Farida really wanted to tell their stories. And I think one of the themes of the film is that when you're in a situation like that, when you're in prison, when your family's disowned you, when you don't even have an identity card that gives you an identity in the country, one of the only things you can do is use your voice. And so we're honored here to be at Women's Voices Now, and Gulnaz and Farida, we want to honor their courage in raising their voice in the face of such incredible pressure and danger to do so. So I don't know if they answer your question, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to say anything to?
Yeah, so thank you so much for bringing these two stories into light. But as you mentioned, there are thousands, unfortunately, tens of thousands of women with similar stories. I was born in Afghanistan. I was raised in Pakistan. I've lived in the US for 26 years. And even for somebody who was born and raised in Afghanistan and has gone back multiple times, watching this documentary was still gut-wrenching. For me, it was gut-wrenching because I felt like I knew these people, because every person from Afghanistan that you talk to, they know at least one person who is a victim of severe domestic violence, rape victims that have been forced to marry their attackers. And so this story is unfortunately representative of thousands of stories in Afghanistan. And I am so thankful to Gulnaz and Farida for having the courage to share their stories, because it's easy to get intimidated. Even for people like us, I am from Afghanistan. I started stand-up comedy a couple of years ago, and as soon as one of my first video came out, I started getting death threats, even by some people in the United States who live here. They started sending death threats and told me that they might not be able to do anything to me here, but my family lives in Afghanistan. My family would beg me to stop performing because I'm putting their lives in danger, to the point of emotional blackmail that if something happens to us, it's your fault, and you're going out there and you're talking and you're putting our lives in danger. But at the end of the day, I think Farida said it better. If there's nothing else I can do, it's just my voice. My voice is the only thing that I can raise and fight with. And so incredible women, and I'm so thankful to them for telling us their stories, but more importantly, telling us that sometimes taking that risk is really worth it. And the story didn't have a really good ending for these two, but hopefully it will shed light into what is happening in Afghanistan, and it'll be sort of a guidance for the rest of us to see where we can jump in and help.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Going back to the film, we watch as it's very nuanced, it's not as black and white, right? There's the complications of the European Union. There's the complications, as we see in the film, where it's not just the men, it's the women, the older women, trying to keep these tribal laws in place. So my question to you, Sam, is what made you not give up after that full year of shooting and they wanted to shut down your film? 1 year, full year of shooting, and they wanted to shut it down. What made you keep going as a filmmaker, you and the other filmmakers? And how did that media coverage come about? Did you go looking for it? Was it an accident? Tell us behind the scenes stuff.
Some behind the scenes dirt, yeah. Well, the first answer and the truest answer to that question is we were committed to honor the voices of Gulnaz and Farida, who we spent years with, and we were not going to let anyone silence them. It's been a long road. We started shooting this film over a dozen years ago, and so, yeah, it's hard to make films like this sometimes. But when the European Union shut us down, I'm still a little mad about it. They gave us funding to make the film, and then the headquarters in Brussels said we had to delete our footage. And as a filmmaker, that's not acceptable, especially with a film like this. But I think for us, not only was it, were we angry about that, obviously, but we also thought that it added another layer to the story. And we didn't want to put that story in. It's behind the scenes. People don't want to know about that. But as I was sitting editing with Nick over here, we couldn't figure out how to actually make the story make sense unless we added that story. And as soon as we finally decided to put that story into the film, we realized that we had to tell the behind-the-scenes story, and that behind-the-scenes story added another layer of complexity to the story of these two women. Because what is the limits of our involvement, the international involvement in Afghanistan and other places, in other cultures? What can we change? What do we have the right to change? Does our presence there help or hurt? And actually, does our presence as filmmakers help or hurt? We had to insert ourselves into the story in this instance. We did pay Farida's husband to divorce her. We had a choice, and we made that choice. We did go to the press to tell them what was happening with the European Union. We were not allowed to talk about it contractually, but we did tell them what was happening. They picked the fight with the wrong people. We knew every single journalist in Afghanistan. So, but we made it clear that we wanted to do that to tell the story of these women. And so when Gulnaz agreed to speak to the press, that was a win for us, and she was, featured on the front page of the New York Times. And that obviously led to her pardon, that international pressure. But it then went away, and now we've gone away, and now the Taliban have taken back power in Afghanistan, and no one seems to care anymore. So that's why we wanted to finish the film and show it to people so that we can keep this conversation alive.
So let's rewind for just a second. That was the very first time the president of Afghanistan pardoned somebody for a moral crime, right? And we think it's because, this is a prime example of the power of film and why women's voices now exists, right? In your filming, was that part of something that you had imagined, that this film would make that impact? Was it something that was a goal? Did you or were you shocked? Like, how was that reaction when that happened?
I got to say, that was all Kim, and Kim is a force of nature. And no, we had no idea that was going to happen. What's interesting is that even though President Karzai pardoned her, he also, told his attorney general to go talk to the women's shelter to try to convince her to marry her rapist. So, there's a public face and a behind-the-scenes face in that situation as well. But, people make a lot of noises. The Taliban are making a lot of noises right now, as I'm sure you can talk about, that they're respecting women's rights. They've just submitted a statement to the UN saying we respect women's rights, and you guys have no idea what you're talking about. And then they won't let women go to school. They beat them if they're in public without a man. So it's tough to figure out what's really going on. But yeah, we were surprised.
Let's touch about what's happening today, right? So that film, it took 10 years to finish, and this year we're at 2 years mark since the Taliban took over. This film was filmed before the Taliban took over again. So Nilab, can you give us a little bit of context about what that means for Afghanistan as a society and as a whole, and for women after the Taliban took over? What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of wanted to go back a little bit and say that when the Golnar story hit the media and Karzai went there with a lot of pride saying that this is the first time that a woman has been pardoned for moral crime, that should not have been the message. The message should have been, this is not a moral crime, and this one should not have gone to prison.
Yes.
That would have been the thing to say. So for Karzai to actually even try to get any kind of credit, I think those were the type of policies that made it possible for the Taliban to actually come back. So that was the issue, that was the problem. So now, what happens now in Afghanistan? Had this film been released now, or had this situation happened when the Taliban were in power, these two women would have been stoned to death, probably publicly somewhere, and you would have seen it on social media everywhere, and you would have seen a bunch of people stoning these women to death and a whole bunch other watching and filming it. Unfortunately, it does happen on a daily basis. I am a stand-up comedian. I haven't performed any comedy in the last 2 years because there's nothing to laugh about in Afghanistan anymore. Nothing. It is depressing. So as it stands right now, the entire nation of Afghanistan, but specifically women, are being held hostage. And there's absolutely right. Women do not have the right to go to school. There's really absolutely no sight. There's no light at the end of this tunnel, unfortunately. And so what that means to ordinary people like myself, that we're not in any kind of government, we are not representatives of any specific people, we're just ordinary women of Afghanistan. Some of us have lived through the same experiences. I personally was a victim of domestic violence myself, but fortunately I lived in the United States, so I was able to go to the police with confidence and get out of that situation, and I'm here speaking to you guys about it now. This is not available to anyone in Afghanistan right now. So what you saw in that documentary was the golden era, as they call it. So imagine that, and imagine what's happening in Afghanistan right now.
In the film, we see that there's a difference between tribal law and the regular justice system. Has the tribal law become the whole justice system? Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. It has, the justice system in Afghanistan, I was involved in some work in Afghanistan for 2001 to 2005, 2006, and I worked a lot with women in business. And even back then, a lot of this was sort of a show. And I can understand why the European Union was trying to really censor this movie, for this documentary from coming out, because the government in Afghanistan, as I mentioned earlier, their policies was the reason why the Taliban are back. So there was some kind of something on paper that this is democracy, this is an elected government, and there's women's rights. And yes, there were some strides made, and there are things that happened Women did make, there was some progression for women, but it came at a everything was almost superficial. Everything was just something on the surface, nothing with like actual basis. So a lot of this was because the interests of special people were protected in Afghanistan a lot more than the interest of half of the population that were women. And you saw that at the Ministry of Women's Affairs, that is the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and yet they were the ones that conspired into getting Gulnaz marrying her attacker. That's just one example. And so, yes, the tribal law has completely taken over, and it's kind of hard to distinguish what's tribal, what's religious, but there is no logic into anything that happens in Afghanistan. So that's unfortunately the world that we live in. And even for me, as I speak about it, and you can feel that I'm really not nervous, I'm more angry right now, is that it sounds so surreal that we are in 21st century, and that is what's happening in Afghanistan. And we, US taxpayers, we pay taxes, and so much of our money went into rebuilding Afghanistan, and this is where we ended. So as an American, I'm really pissed off. Excuse my French.
Yeah, and I just want to add one quick thing, and I know we don't have too much time, but first of all, thank you for being here and for sharing your truth. It's hard for me to sit here and speak. I can't speak for Afghans. I mean, but I will say this. I will say that many Afghans I came to know and love are incredible, courageous, wonderful people, and smart. And the new generation, there was hope there for a while. And you know, there's a couple Afghans here, Hassan and Kudrat. I don't know if you're here, but you know, there's a lot of people who fled Afghanistan. The people in Afghanistan who are fighting hard are the ones who are persecuted by the Taliban, and they've now left. So it's a really tough situation. But I just wanted to say that Afghans are incredible people and wonderful, and we shouldn't think that the whole country's lost. I know we may have lost hope at this moment, but anyway.
So where do we go from here? We saw, you know, we've seen that there is power in film, right? But now the situation has gotten even worse since this film. Where can we move? How can we move from empathy, from watching this and knowing this, to action? In the smallest way, in the biggest way, what do you suggest?
I think if you are really following the news in Afghanistan and there is a real interest in Afghanistan's affairs, the smallest thing or the easiest thing you could do right now, as we speak right now, there's a girl in Germany, a woman in Germany, who was a victim. When the Taliban returned to Afghanistan, she was a very popular YouTuber, and they actually went to her house to arrest her, and she went live on Facebook during that ordeal. She fled the scene. She got out of Afghanistan, and she has been on a hunger strike for the last today is the 8th day. Her name is Tamana Paryoni. So you can Google her. It's the 8th day, and all she wants is for media, international media, and international organizations to pay attention to her. She is on a hunger strike to tell the world that it's been more than 2 years that girls don't have access to primary education in Afghanistan. So Google her, please, and support her and show this. That's something we could do within the matter of the next few minutes. And just in the long term, again, I'm going to go back to Farida. If we have nothing else, we have our voices. That's if you don't have the opportunity to do anything else, speak about this, be well informed, and then speak about it. And just if there are organizations that, please research the organizations. As we saw here, the European Union, the Ministry of Women's Affairs. Before you spend any of your time or energy, research the organizations to make sure that you are actually working with the right organizations that represent Gulnaz and represents Farida's and not a special interest. There are a lot of us that are trying to do something. We just need to be united and have a united voice. And I think media does a really good job. And thank you so much, Women's Voices now, because this is, most of us, and I'm sorry if I'm actually speaking on your behalf, we are not politicians, we don't come from money, and we don't have a lot of resources. What we do have is our voices. What we do have is in our homes, we have internet, we have TV, we have our phones. So through media, everybody watches something. So be aware, support programs that go outside of politics. They're non-governmental, they're non-profit. Support them and help them, pitch stories to them, tell them, fund them if you can actually fund these programs so that they could build a more of a bridge through entertainment industry, through movie, through media, because I'm sorry, I hate watching politicians give speeches, but if somebody actually does a nice documentary or even a feature film about an issue, that it resonates a lot more better with me. So we can support organizations like this, and we can be part of it, volunteer, donate our time, whatever you can, and that would be more of a long-term impact that we can all make. I can guarantee you. We all have at least one of those. We have our voice, we might have a little money, some time, whatever you can give.
And speaking of getting this out, Sam shared some exciting news about this documentary that we'd like to share with everyone.
Yeah, so just today, we're very excited to announce, I think this is the first time we'll be announcing this publicly, but we just found out, well, it's been a long time in process, but as of today, we're excited to announce that Angelina Jolie is coming on board to be an executive producer of the film, which is super exciting. Yeah, and we couldn't think of a better partner for the film because she has spent her life advocating for women's rights and trying to lift up women's voices. And we'll have more information soon. It just happened really today. So she was maybe going to come, but I don't think she did. Are you here? No, she's not here.
I was here for Angelina Jolie.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of what we can do, listen, what I would love for you guys all to do is, you can do it on your phone, just go to thisbreath.org, that's our website, and if you sign up for our mailing list, I'll send you updates about, what's going to happen next with Angelina Jolie and potential distribution and where we can get this message out and what organizations we can support. We do have some on our website, but we're going to be building an impact campaign. So sign up for our newsletter and we can get the word out.
There's no sneak peek of where other people can watch this film, or where it's going to be distributed? There's no information about that we can share? No? No?
Not yet, but
Okay.
soon. Sign up for our mailing list and you'll find out.
Okay, all right, sign up. Well, it was such an honor to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Is there anything else that you would like to share, not just with the in-person audience, but with those who are streaming live right now?
You go first.
I just want to thank you, you and everybody who's watching on YouTube. I forgot that was happening. Hi. These stories are important to keep telling, and it's our job as filmmakers to amplify the voices of women and underrepresented people. Again, use my white male privilege to support and amplify other people's voices. It's really important, I think. So, thanks. So, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and I would like to just say that although it's very dark right now, the Afghanistan situation looks really dark, but there are a lot of very courageous people, and especially women in Afghanistan, that will need your help and support. They're not afraid to speak up. They just need a medium to be able to get their voices out. There's a face of Afghanistan that we see through a lot of media. And then there were these two women that even though they're victims, they came out and fought like crazy. And there are millions of other Afghan women in Afghanistan that are courageous. They are ready to fight. We just need to help them, and we just need to figure out how to assist them. And one day, I don't even want to sit next year and say there's been 3 years since Taliban's takeover. So let's help them. Let's get them the assistance that they need.
Yeah, and thank you, Heidi, for putting on such a wonderful festival, and Yasmin, and all the Women's Voices Now, incredible people. who are here.
Thank you. Stories are powerful, and as you all were moved in the audience, we all have our own stories, and so yes, thank you for amplifying women's voices and for amplifying your voice through your work.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all. We have also a little bit of a surprise with
Yes, over
Heidi
here in the
over here.
corner. Who has it? You do. This is a company that celebrates filmmakers and activists like Sam and Nilab, who sent these packages of very heavy items. I'm not even sure what's in here, but it's very special, and I'm very excited
Shoes.
because I didn't open it, I didn't peek. So I'm presenting it to both of you. I'm not going to have you carry it right now, but before you leave tonight, you have very heavy congratulation boxes of who has it? You do. So thank you.
Wow, thank you.
I hope there are a pair of stilettos in there.
You can have the stilettos.
Yeah, if there are stilettos, they're mine.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's an honor to have everybody come and be a part of this organization, and we can't do it without you. So thank you so much.